So we are starting to admit folks here. It might take just a few minutes to get Zoom caught up with the intent of letting folks in. So we're just going to give it a minute or so here. If you'll find that your audio should be muted kind of automatically. It's one of the settings that we have set up for today. You are also welcome to leave your video on or turn it off, kind of up to your preference there. So we'll just wait a minute or so more here and let folks in, just so everybody knows they're in the right place. This is the International Career Boot Camps for Nonprofits and NGOs. If you're not in the right place, hang out. Cool information, good stuff, lots of networking, cool people. And it's good to kind of see everybody. For those of you who have videos on, it's been quite a start to the semester. So, alrighty. Okay, so I guess without further ado, this is really interesting to like introduce people in my sitting in my living room, but we're very, very excited to have you all with us today. What we're gonna start with is just kind of some welcoming remarks. We'll go through kind of an outline for what the day is gonna look like. So first and foremost, I just wanna say good afternoon and welcome to the Career Bootcamp. This is being recorded, so if you have your video on, it should still only be recording those who are like the speakers, those who are set up as kind of co-hosts of the event, but it will be recorded. So if you want to reference anything back later, that should be available to you. This event is being hosted by the Institute for Regional and International Studies, or IRIS, as it's affectionately known. And we're very grateful for their support today in bringing two speakers. We're delighted to welcome IS Major alumna Gabriela Cristobal and SuccessWorks advisor Emmeline Pratke today. And the other person I'm going to introduce for you all to kind of have an understanding of how Zoom is going to work and the settings is Essie Lenchner. And so Essie, do you want to just introduce yourself and the role you'll play a little bit behind the scenes today?
Hi everyone, I'm Essie. I'm the tech moderator for today, so I'm here to make sure that if you have any trouble with anything, you can always chat me directly or just send any message in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. I'm also here just to make sure that the right people are in this meeting and no one interrupts in any way. So I'm really just here in the background, and I'll be chiming in sometimes with questions or answers to certain things that pop up, and I'm mostly here to help out.
Thank you, Essie. So for the functions that you all should have, I'm going to introduce Gabrielle and Emmeline in a bit more detail, but I want to start with a few housekeeping items for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with Zoom. The settings that you should all have available to you are primarily the one that we are going to focus on is the chat box. So that you can, if you toggle your mouse over the screen on the bottom toolbar, there should be a little speech bubble that shows up and says chat. If you click on that, it should open up the chat window in a separate little window for you. So it'll pop up kind of outside of the Zoom video. And you can either, as we're going through and the speakers are talking today, please feel free to add questions in the chat. Otherwise, that will be kind of our main function for moderating questions during the Q&A section later as well. And you'll see that Essie kind of put a little welcome remark in there if you have your chat open. And then we also have the other option that should be able to kind of play with is adjusting how you see the speaker, so how the windows appear to you as you're watching. Again, if you toggle your mouse, you should be able to see in the upper right hand corner kind of speaker view or full screen options, so you can play with that as works best for you. So a brief outline of what our event is going to look like today. We will begin by hearing from Gabriela Cristobal for about 20-ish minutes. And then we're going to hear from Emmeline and SuccessWorks for about 20-ish minutes. And around 4:40 or 4:45-ish, we will plan to transition to kind of a Q&A section where we'll address some of the questions that folks submitted in their pre-registration or in the registration process, as well as kind of address and answer questions that come up during the chat and give you all more information about how to follow up with either resources or Emmeline, or follow up with Emmeline or Gabriela directly. So that's going to be the plan. We'll see, you know, hoping technology sticks with us here and we can kind of get started. So I am going to start by introducing Gabriela Cristobal and then handing it over to her. Gabriella currently serves as the Director of Programs and Strategic Engagement at the United States of Women, where she runs USOW's programming movement work and supports culture change and other strategic engagement opportunities. Previously, she worked for the United Nations Foundation, supporting grassroots advocates across the country in developing new tools and models to better engage Americans with both Congress and the UN, as well as with campaigns and state representatives on the local level in her home state of Wisconsin. Back when she was at UW-Madison, she was an IS major and political science major and earned a certificate in gender and women's studies. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Gabriella. And then Gabriella, when you feel your remarks are wrapped up, let me know and I'll be happy to transition and introduce Emmeline. So Gabriella.
Thank you so much, Molly. And thank you everybody for joining today. I'm so excited to be talking to all of you. As I speak, I'm going to move so I can see a few more faces. I know that you all spend a lot of time on Zoom right now. So the fact that you are here dedicating a little bit of your non-Zoom time in life is amazing. And I think also says something to probably how excited you all are to get career resources, figure out what you're doing, apply your degree to real life setting, which is definitely super important. And I think sometimes harder said than done. So I will fill in a few gaps from Molly's introduction. I grew up in Wisconsin. I wanted to do international studies, nonprofit work pretty much my whole life. I saw that Mary-Kate and Ashley movie with Model UN when I was younger, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. That's who I'm gonna be. And that sort of worked out for me in some ways. I did political science and international studies when I was on campus, and I had quite a few internships while I was in school. So I spent a year in the Wisconsin State Assembly. I did the Wisconsin and Washington program when it was only international in the fall and then domestic in the summer. And I did the international version. And I spent most of my senior year also interning on a US Senate campaign. So I think my undergraduate classes were fantastic. I obviously was really getting a broad understanding of what working at a nonprofit could be like and different interest areas. But I think where my real world experience came in was those internships that I did on campus. Can definitely be tricky. I think because I also worked the entire time I was on campus, I was doing a job, I was doing an internship, and so I wasn't super involved in clubs. I was in a few of them, but I wasn't on leadership everywhere. I wasn't involved with everything. I had to sort of pick what was going to be really important to me, and I viewed internships as another sort of extracurricular activity that was really enhancing what I was going to do. There was still some social interaction, and that was really important to me. When I did the Wisconsin and Washington program, I actually interned at the UN Foundation. And so after graduating, I decided to reach back out to those connections, had maybe let them lapse a little bit more than I should have. And I can talk a little bit about how you can stay engaged with people you've previously internshiped or networked with without feeling like every month you're sending them something for no point. And eventually ended up working there, first in a really entry-level position. I was called a campaign coordinator. So I was doing, folks' invoices, scheduling meetings, working on the budget, like really basic things. And the understanding was that you master these sort of tasks, and then you let the team know where you're interested in developing your skills, and then you would get put on extra projects. So I think when I accepted the job, I was like, okay, is this really what I want to be doing? Am I going to get pigeonholed into something that I don't want to do? Am I just going to get stuck with tasks I don't want? And ultimately, I was able to really gain a lot of skills. So by the time another position opened up, I was able to say on my team, I'm already doing that. So I would like to apply. And also, you should probably just give me this job. And being able to make those sort of stepping stone moves and lateral moves were really important to me. And then from there, I was so fortunate to get to do a lot of work with the UN and with a lot of global health coalitions, also getting to work on more of the federal level and working within the US government system, and decided that I wanted to ultimately do things that were a little bit more domestic, pulling on some other internships, but definitely used not just my internship experiences, but some of my first academic experiences, or excuse me, professional experiences to decide what I wanted to do. I think when I entered college, I was like, okay, you know, I saw the Mary-Kate and Ashley movie, I'm gonna be an international studies major, I'm gonna work for the State Department. And I thought, you can move to DC and work for the State Department, or you can work for the federal government, and that is all there is out there. And so doing the Wisconsin and Washington program helped open my eyes to so many other opportunities where you could affect change. You could work at a nonprofit that helps international organizations on their coalition work. So coordinating across WHO, the World Health Organization, and the more regional health organizations and state governments that have initiatives and the private sector to do work. Or there could be a really big push on the international level, and the work that you're doing is to get federal appropriations dollars and more support so that the US is a really strong player in that. And that can feel really far removed, but when you think about who makes decisions, that's, you know, Congress, and who is Congress responsible to their constituents. So you may be talking about signing on to or pledging money to some UN initiative that feels really important when you're studying it in international studies courses, but ultimately it could be so much as a few people from Arkansas, Louisiana, Maine, calling their members of Congress and saying, hey, this is really important to me. I care about global health immunization, or I care about a coordinated international COVID response. A lot of my friends in this space are still doing that. So if I haven't mentioned it enough already in the first few minutes, I think that the Wisconsin and Washington program is a great opportunity, if you're able to do it, to get yourself out to DC and start getting some of those internship experiences. Also, if you have an internship experience and you hate it, that's okay. That is a great way to learn about something you do not want to do. I had internships where I was like, this is not the right fit. And I was able to cross that off my list of future careers and keep moving on with other things. So I know, kind of going back to something I was just saying a minute ago, you feel like you have to come into college and know exactly what you're going to do, but figuring out what you don't want to do can sometimes be just as important. And I'm going to take a moment to look at some of the other things that I had written up just to make sure that I'm touching on everything. That being said, I know this fall, Wisconsin and Washington is not happening. You all are learning and possibly interning remotely, and it can be really difficult in the nonprofit space. We don't have the same infrastructure as a lot of other industries when it comes to hiring and internships. And sometimes it's just when you have the funding to have an intern, maybe it's unpaid, maybe you don't have the capacity to push it out really widely. And so it can be difficult, especially now when people are working with reduced budgets, when a lot of their plans for the year maybe have been overnight evaporated, and folks don't know what they're doing, or they're sort of operating in crisis mode. But it also gives the opportunity to connect with a lot of people that you would not have the option to connect with. I think people are really comfortable now hopping on Zoom, hopping on the phone, and getting coffee with a student, and that can be so valuable. If you're looking to work in DC, but really anything in this space, it is so relationship built, for better or worse. 100% of the jobs that I have gotten have been because somebody told me about them. Somebody forwarded on my resume to the hiring manager, and somebody vouched for me. I have always had that opportunity, not because I am the most well-connected person, my family is not in this space, but because in college, when I was interning my first few years, in being a young professional, I was networking. I was keeping a very detailed spreadsheet of all the people that I had connected with and where they worked and where they used to work and what we talked about, so that a few months later when I was like, hey, your organization is hiring, I could email them and say, oh, hey, hope things are going well. You know, are you playing for this softball team again? Saw that you all are hiring, would love, you know, to connect with you about the opportunity, this and this, that, and that. And you all have the ability now to go on LinkedIn, look at the organizations, the nonprofits, the institutions that you want to work at, and maybe, you know, who has that dream job, but also who has that like entry-level job and like second-level job, because those are the people screening your resumes. Those are the people who are tasked with hiring their replacements. And it doesn't mean they have less work, like they don't want to be doing this. So as easy as you can make it for them, say, hey, I'm, you know, looking for a job in this many months, or I'm looking for an internship. Like, take advantage of that. When I first got to DC, I was like, well, what if they say no? Are they gonna think it's weird that I'm reaching out to them? I think it's weird that I'm reaching out to them. Nobody thinks it's weird that you're reaching out. Say, I saw you on LinkedIn and your job looked really interesting, and I would love to learn more about how you got to where you are. You can start looking at alums. You know, LinkedIn, I think, is not as well utilized by people in the international and nonprofit space as it should be for career networking. But like, you can go to Wisconsin and you can search Wisconsin and search everyone who went to school there, and then start looking by industry and like filing through people. And that's a great way to connect with people. Even if they don't have something in common with me, I will usually try and make time for them. But if someone's like, I also went to Wisconsin, or I also used to intern here, I'm like, amazing. You had one of the same experiences as me. And so I think that's a really strong way to start building a network. I'm sure some of you are seniors, some of you are just starting to think about internships maybe after your first or second year, but you don't have to be following up with these people every month. It can just be if you see an Economist article that related to what you were talking about, or if you do see, hey, it's fall, I'm looking for an internship. Do you know of anybody looking for, you know, paid internships that are remote or based in wherever you want to be? I think that's a great way to sort of touch base maybe every semester, every summer, whenever you feel comfortable. You can personalize the email, use mail merge, BCC people, but you definitely have a unique opportunity right now in that people are more willing to connect with you. I would say about working in the international nonprofit space, it is very similar to working in nonprofits in general, in that a lot of it is who you know. If you are like me, maybe because you've also saw a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie when you were growing up, or maybe not, and you want to work at the UN someday, most people I know there have master's degrees. It definitely varies a little bit by the country that you're coming from. They have very interesting sort of hiring practices around the countries that they bring people in from and how they make up teams, which I think rightly so, but it can sometimes make it more competitive to be coming from the US. I have had multiple friends that have worked with the UN or a UN agency on contract without a master's degree, and they came from very similar, you know, state schools in the Midwest and the South that maybe aren't known for having a lot of direct access to the UN versus like NYU or Columbia, just because of geographic location. But that came from working at US-based nonprofits that do international work and coalition work. So it's not always a direct shot there, but thinking about, okay, what's the issue area I want to work in? Who are the partners that they work with? Who will I be building relationships with professionally? Where can I like make those jumps? Is definitely important to start thinking about, especially because your internships, your first job or first year or two are really transferable skills. I can remember going into internship interviews and thinking like, yeah, I did this policy briefing. They're totally going to want to hire me. I know all these things about this. And they were really interested in my time management and how I could organize things and my ability to like stay on task and keep myself on track with projects and follow up. Because you can teach someone about policy, but you only get one first impression at being detail oriented or being on top of a project and different things like that. So I think that even while you may be thinking, okay, I have to have the internship that's going to give me like the best experience because I definitely want to do this, and that is important. You should definitely seek out internships where you can that align with your values, especially in this work. But even if it doesn't feel 100% like the perfect fit, you can make the most out of it. You can get so much out of an internship. And I think that is definitely something that I wish I would have known. Thinking specifically, you have some amazing resources that you have access to at Wisconsin. I know towards the end, we'll talk about sort of continuing the conversation, but I'm also happy, Molly, to send over some places that are now sort of in the back of my brain about where you can look for internships. And jobs for me graduating, that was like a full-time job. I sat at my parents' kitchen, I had my spreadsheet, and I was like, I spend an hour and a half in the morning looking for jobs, and I spent the afternoon applying for them. And I really treated it like that, and it made a big difference. And it also helped, you know, I kept track of those when I was looking for internships, and then I could revisit that list for jobs. But in the policy space, in the nonprofit space, especially if you're trying to work internationally, don't worry too much about if it's 100% always the exact fit. You can network with people that are going to be working at similar organizations. If you can keep gaining skills, that's going to be really important. And I completely forgot the third thing I was going to say, but I guarantee the second I stop talking, it'll come to me, because that's sort of how we exist on Zoom now. But I would definitely say, oh, there it is. I just paused for a second. Even if you don't think you have all of the experience for something, like apply for it. I think that it is easy to look at a list of job requirements and say, well, I don't know how to do policy analysis, or I have technically never, run a grassroots campaign, but I'm sure that you've done organizing on campus. I am sure that you know from classes where to look to be informed or become informed about policy. And if you have a lot of those transferable skills, you can create a cover letter, an application package, tailor your resume and your interview responses to demonstrate how, even if you don't have 100% of the qualifications, you know where to go and how to find out to fill in those gaps. And that is what is more important. So that is my last little rant just about applying for the job, for the internship, even if there's 100 other people doing it. Definitely important.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. There's a lot of information in there, and it's all so valuable. And some of the points that I took away were really the value of networking and career searching. I also loved what you said about almost setting up an Excel spreadsheet of, when you find an opportunity, or you find, either a search engine that works really well for you or a company that aligns with your values, it's easy to be in the moment and have that tab open on your browser window. But as soon as you X out of that, or let's say give it a month, you either forget the link or you forget that it was there, and kind of having a spreadsheet to maintain those resources as you're going through is a great way to sort of keep track of that advice. And you can have different tabs on Excel for, networking and people contacts versus search engines and websites. And absolutely, please do feel free to send me those links that were helpful to you, and we'll get them forwarded to the registrants today. then also kind of breaking down like your dream internship or your dream job, and knowing that there's different skills you can develop and take away from different opportunities, I think is really important too. So thank you so much. And I have a couple other questions. As you were talking, I was like, oh, I wonder what she thinks about this. So we'll be sure to kind of bring that back when we finish hearing from Emmeline, and that will be a good kind of segue into our transition here. I'm going to introduce Emmeline Pratke. She is, as she mentioned, the SuccessWorks advisor. She graduated from UW-Madison in 2017 with a double major in political science and French, and a certificate in European studies with honors in the liberal arts. After spending a year in northern France teaching English to high school students, Emmeline returned to Madison to pursue her Master's of French Studies with a specialty in international higher education. And as part of her graduate program, she interned with the Student Services Office of a Francophone university in Montreal, where she worked to improve resources for international and permanent resident students. She now works as a career and internship specialist with SuccessWorks, advising students in the College of Letters and Science who are interested in that career community of government, policy, international affairs, and law. And I also know that she worked with the International Internship Program for a while, and just has a plethora of resources. And I know that she has a presentation with some more links and information there. So I'm gonna, at this point then, Emmeline, invite you to start sharing your screen and unmute yourself and take it away.
Wonderful, thank you, Molly. So as Molly mentioned, I do have a PowerPoint here that has a ton of information and a ton of resources. Basically, I want to warn you that I'm going to touch on a lot of different things today and not go into a lot of detail. So hopefully this will spark a lot of questions for you, and please feel free to follow up with me after this presentation with whatever other questions you have, because it'll be quite a bit of information in a pretty short amount of time. So with that, I will go ahead and get started talking about international careers. So as Molly said, my name is Emmeline Pratke. She pretty much covered all of this in the introduction, but yeah, if you do have any other questions or want more information about, what it's like to live in Montreal or Northern France or any of that, always feel free to reach out. Happy to talk about all of those fun things. As she mentioned, I used to work with the International Internship Program as well as International Academic Program, so study abroad and intern abroad. So I'm pretty familiar with those as well, if that's something else you have questions on. But now I really focus on career advising for students interested in this government policy, international affairs, and law area, which is really exciting. There are a ton of really cool opportunities that you as UW students can take advantage of. So that'll be the main focus of my talk today, is talking about how you can access international opportunities and what you can be doing now as a student to prepare. So first, we'll talk about getting a job abroad. There are a lot of different ways to get into international work. As Gabriella mentioned, one really popular one is to work with the federal government. So one really popular, really well-known way to get in with the federal government is to work in the Foreign Service as a diplomat at a consulate and doing that kind of diplomacy work. If this is something that is interesting for you, one thing that you should know is that it's a pretty long application process. Once you apply, you submit a written application that has several essays about why you are interested in this field, what particular track you're interested in, and kind of what your main skills are and main qualifications are for this type of work. And then once you submit that, you have to take an exam. That's pretty similar to something like the ACT, except it tests your logical reasoning, as well as your knowledge of current events, your communication skills, things like that. If you pass that exam, then you move on to evaluation of the written materials that you submitted before you took the exam. So that's the first time they actually look at any of those essays that you spent lots of time writing, is after the exam. If you are chosen to move on from that level, then they bring you in for an interview. And if you move on from there, that's when you're considered for placement. So it's a very long process. And one other thing to note is that it's very common for people to apply for the Foreign Service multiple times. Anything from like 3 or 4 times is totally normal to apply and reapply for this program, because it is quite competitive. So even if it's something that you aren't able to make happen straight out of undergrad, it's still definitely something to consider, because as you spend more time working in another field, you'll become a better and better applicant, as well as getting more familiar with things like the applications and the exams and all of that. So if it ends up being something that you have to pursue a little bit more long-term, it's still a very valid option. and a great one to consider. There are a couple of fellowship opportunities I want to mention that help you kind of avoid a lot of that other application process. They're called the Pickering and Rangel Graduate Fellowships. And in addition to funding your graduate school in international affairs, they basically kickstart a career in the Foreign Service. So if you're interested in going to grad school and know that you want to pursue an option in the Foreign Service, those are two options to look into in more detail and apply. I think the applications are actually open now, so this is a good time to look into them. Intelligence is also a really common career path to consider for working abroad with the federal government. For example, CIA, FBI, NSA, all of those are great options. However, one thing to know, kind of similar to the Foreign Service, is that these hiring processes, both for internships and for full-time employment, are very long. Think a year or more from the time that you apply to the time that you can actually begin working, because they have such extensive security checks. So if this is something, again, if this is something you're interested in, you want to start looking into it early so that you have enough time to take advantage of those internship opportunities and time to get into that full-time work after you end your degree. USA Jobs is another really great resource for federal work. It's definitely worth taking a look there if you are interested in working with the federal government. It has almost everything that is not included in like the CIA, FBI, NSA, those type of ones that have a different hiring process. Almost everything else for the federal government can be found on usajobs.gov. So it's a really helpful resource. A couple things to know when you're navigating that one. One is that the postings are super jargon heavy. They have like their own language that they use for those federal type postings. So it's something that you do have to kind of get familiar with. You also often need a federal style resume to apply. So if that's something that you would like some help with, that's absolutely something I can help you with. We have a new Canvas module that can walk you through the basics of a federal style resume. So if you're interested in something like that, just let me know, send me an email, and we can get you more resources to get started on that process. NGOs, nonprofits, and intergovernmental organizations, again, as Gabriella mentioned, are also a really fantastic resource. And Gabriella, if you have anything to add here, please feel free. Kind of, as she mentioned, NGOs and nonprofits, it's great to think both on an international scale of organizations working in multiple different countries, as well as a national scale of either organizations working within the United States or American organizations working in another region or in another country. And one great resource that I know for searching is Idealist. It's the closest thing that there is to a job board for nonprofits and NGOs. So it's a really great resource to use. They have volunteer opportunities, internships, full-time employment, all sorts of good stuff on there. International development is also a really interesting kind of path to take in this field. It is very competitive. As Gabrielle mentioned, again, grad programs are a huge help here. Having, again, that other experience doing research abroad or living abroad can make a huge difference in order to get these opportunities. It is possible to break in other ways. As she mentioned, with networking is really important in these fields, and I'll talk more about that later. But networking is another kind of way to get in on the ground level. But what I've heard from a lot of different alumni that I've spoken to who are working in these fields, even if you do manage to kind of get in at an entry level, you often do need a grad degree to be able to move up. So just one thing to be aware of if you're really interested in international development, a grad program is probably going to be in your future at some point. Maybe not necessarily right away. There's a lot of other things that you can do that would be very relevant to experience and help you prepare to get into that in the longer term. But just being aware, it might not be the most realistic or the easiest path to take straight out of undergrad. Some other search resources I just wanted to mention are DevX and DevNet. Both of those are very focused on international development. If you take a look on that, you'll see that many of them have either a requirement or a preference for a master's degree, but you might be able to find other ones that you can apply for as well. So it's worth just taking a look and seeing what types of opportunities are out there in that field. Intergovernmental organizations, again, super highly competitive. So maybe not something that you'd be able to jump into straight out of undergrad. One other thing just to note, in addition to the importance of networking, is that you might find opportunities with organizations like the UN posted on sites like Indeed or LinkedIn. However, if you're interested in those opportunities, you always want to use the organization's website as your main resource, because a lot of times as those posts get like copied and shared onto other resources, some of the information goes missing, some of the processes go missing, it might be missing a contact or a date that's really important. So if you're looking at those opportunities, always focus on the website of the organization itself and not on like secondary search resources. American or international companies are also a really interesting thing to consider. However, you really want to be very thoughtful about where you bring value, where your specific skill set and your specific background brings a value to this company. So for example, that might be an American company that's working abroad or vice versa, especially if you've lived in another country, you know the culture, you know the language, that kind of duality and understanding of both locations can be a really huge help and a really big thing in your favor, as well as just language skills, technical skills, pretty much anything like that. Just really being thoughtful about kind of where do you apply that your unique skill set and your unique background brings the most value. You also want to be very mindful about the visa and work permit processes. These take a very, very long time, and they can be a complicated process with a lot of different elements happening. There's no like universal way to help you navigate a lot of these, so it can be a really frustrating and really long process. And it is worth noting that not all companies are willing to go through this process to hire an international candidate. Usually that's something they're pretty upfront about, but just kind of being aware that, you know, it's much easier in general to hire a local candidate. So that's why you need to know your value, and you need to be very intentional about where you're looking for opportunities so that you know that it's a process worth dedicating your time and energy toward. It's also not super easy to find these type of opportunities. Networking, again, is super important, but there are a couple of other search resources that are worth looking into. Going Global and CareerGate can both be accessed through the International Internship Program, because that is the organization that UW-Madison has a subscription to these services through. So the link for CareerGate is on here. Going Global, you would just go to the International Internship Program site, look at their database, log into their database, and then there's a tab to be able to access Going Global through there. But both of those have lots of internships, lots of jobs abroad that are kind of more geared toward international candidates. So if that's something you're interested in, that's a good place to look. One other thing to consider is short-term programs. So as I mentioned, I did teaching English abroad, and it was a really fantastic experience. I chose to come back to the US after my program concluded, but one of my best friends from the program is still living in France. And since the program, she has worked with a startup, she has done her master's degree, and she has done a lot of different really interesting things that all started because we did the TAPEEF program. So these are an amazing option to consider. Even though they start as short-term, they can become long-term based on how motivated you are to make them happen that way. So there's a ton of different options, and they also help with visas most of the time, so you aren't totally on your own in trying to figure out that really challenging process. So another really good option just to get some experience working and living abroad. You can also think about doing research. Fulbright is a great program to do research abroad. There are a lot of other ones as well, but if you know that there's something that you want to look into and you want to learn more about, something like Fulbright can be a great opportunity to do that. Service programs are also looking into. Peace Corps is a fantastic program. In addition to just the value of the work experience and the international experience you gain through the program, there are also benefits that you can access after you complete the program in terms of graduate schools and other federal jobs. So again, another option worth considering. UW-Madison has a Peace Corps representative named Kate Schachter, who does virtual advising appointments. So if you're considering that, even if like 2 years sounds really long or you're not sure if it's the right choice for you, she would be a great person to talk to in more detail about that program. There are a lot of other service programs out there as well, but it's really important that when you're looking at them, that you do your research. I'm guessing most of you would have heard like the term voluntourism, and that is a very big thing that happens in a lot of different service programs, and it's something that you really want to avoid. You want to make sure that when you're traveling and serving in another country, you're doing so in a way that is actually beneficial, both to the local people and to yourself. So do your research, make sure that programs are valid and trustworthy. And if you have any questions, people like Molly have a lot of answers, and Caitlin Kaler in the Language Institute, they can help you kind of work through and figure out if a program is reputable or not. Grad school is another great option to consider abroad. There are a lot of different programs that you can pursue that are usually less expensive than the United States, so it can be a really great option that way as well. However, there are a few different fields that you might need a local degree, thinking like anything health related or legal related. In those situations, you're likely to need an American degree to be able to live and work in the United States. However, if you're planning to live and work abroad long term, then maybe that wouldn't be a consideration. Just something to kind of think about as you're working through all of those different options. So we talked a lot about things that are maybe further in the future or longer term, or not maybe happening right now because of COVID-19. So now I'm going to kind of refocus a little bit, shift gears into what you can do now as a student to kind of prepare yourself long term for an international career, whatever that might look like. So jobs and internships are still happening. There are still opportunities, even if they aren't abroad and even if they aren't exactly what you planned on. And you don't have to go abroad to get relevant experience to work internationally. There are a ton of internationally focused opportunities, things like the Virtual Student Federal Service Program. Right now, there's a UW student who is interning through that program with the Midwest Diplomat in Residence. Like, how cool is that? So there are a ton of internationally focused opportunities through programs like that, as well as just through other search resources that you can find. You can also do things like work in another language. Definitely translation and interpretation. There are opportunities posted to do that kind of work. However, there are also a lot of opportunities that might not have the language ability written into the position, but there would still be opportunities to do that kind of work. So think about what types of organizations or what types of employers might have programs, partners, or projects abroad. Take UW-Madison as an example. You might not think that like UW is a very internationally focused organization, but in reality, there are so many opportunities to do international work at the university. There are programs like study abroad, intern abroad, partners with research, all sorts of projects for funding, everything like that. There are so many different opportunities at all these different levels at this university to do internationally focused work. So be really creative, think about those different things. Again, where might you bring value with your unique skill set? And just be a little bit more creative and open-minded. There are a lot of opportunities out there. Another thing to think about that you might not have thought about already is underrepresented or underserved communities in the United States. This is a really fantastic way to get relevant experience that is intercultural communication experience working with people very different from you, adaptability, flexibility, all of those good things that you can learn working or living abroad, you can also do with different communities in the United States. So AmeriCorps and City Year are just one example of many types of programs that focus on this kind of service work. If you are a current student, you can also check out our new social justice internships program. This is a shameless plug for a program that I'm really excited about and have been working on a lot. Our applications are open now. We have several different internship opportunities with a bunch of really amazing and nonprofits that are doing racial justice work in Dane County. And so there are internship opportunities available for UW-Madison students to be doing some very cool things. So if you're looking for an internship for fall, definitely check those out. Otherwise, there are a lot of other opportunities to get involved in that same type of work through other sources as well. Networking is another thing that you can be doing and should be doing right now as a student. It is essential to break into a lot of these very competitive fields. So a great place to start if you haven't done a ton of networking in the past is by starting with alumni. So there are a million different ways actually to find UW-Madison alumni on LinkedIn. My personal favorite is to go to the home search bar, click people, and then click all fields. It'll bring up like a big sheet that has all sorts of different things that you can check to have criteria that an alum would meet. But there are other ways as well. You can also start from the UW-Madison page and then click alumni and go from there. They all have like some little quirks and issues with them, but there are a lot of different ways to find people, find one that works for you and start reaching out. When you do start reaching out, a really easy thing to ask for is an informational interview. If you haven't done an informational interview, it is a really good thing to know about, because basically all you're doing in those type of meetings is asking questions about someone's work and about their career path and what they do. And in general, people really like to talk about themselves. So it's not a hard thing for them to do, to talk with you about their career and their work and their passions and their motivations. And it gives you a ton of helpful information. You build your professional network, make that connection, and you can ask for things like search advice and for future connections to make as well. So LinkedIn is a great one. Badger Bridge is another as well that's really alumni focused. But in general, if you're having trouble with this, that's also something SuccessWorks can help with. Just let us know, and we have resources and programs that make networking super, super easy. Volunteering is another really great thing to do because you can get experience, network, and build your resume all at once. It's always good to start with causes that you care about. Volunteer Match is a really good resource to be able to find those types of opportunities. You can also use Idealist for NGO and nonprofit work. That can be a good way to kind of break into the field and start making those connections with networking. It can be really helpful. But it's also possible to kind of go beyond what's posted. So you have a lot of skills as a student that, maybe an internship or maybe an organization might not know that they're looking for. So for example, if you are really curious about how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted refugee and immigrant communities in Madison, that's something that you can connect with an organization who works with refugees and recently arrived immigrants in Madison and work with them to get information about their programs and how things have changed for them. You can do interviews with the people that they work with, and that benefits you in your learning and experience. But if you end up with a report that talks about this program and everything that they've done and how the pandemic has impacted them, that's also something that's beneficial to them to be able to share with their donors and to be able to share as a resource. So, there are a lot of ways to kind of go beyond what's just posted on those kind of search sites to find something that's really unique and to be able to create your own opportunities. So don't hesitate to be creative and kind of think about those things as well. There are also a lot of things that you can take advantage of as you're a student here at UW. Study and intern abroad programs are a no-brainer, and there are actually virtual options available during this COVID-19 pandemic. The Wisconsin and Washington program is happening virtually right now for fall, which is really exciting and really different. In spring, the program will happen either virtually or in person, we're hoping, but then in the summer, we'll see. But there are still opportunities to do that kind of learning and to do that kind of work. Obviously, it's not the same as actually going and living abroad, but it's still a really valuable experience to be able to gain those intercultural communication skills, those work skills. Doing an internship in Washington, DC, even if it's remote, is still a really fantastic opportunity. So still worth looking into those, even if they aren't, again, exactly what you planned on or exactly what you expected. Research is another really great thing to think about. You can definitely do this for credit through a course or with a professor, but it's also something that you can do on your own. You know how to do research. You know how to write a really good paper. So you can, again, work with an organization to get data, figure out how to analyze it, and put together something really interesting that's on a topic that you want to learn about. There are no rules that say you can't write your own articles, write your own papers, if you have time and mental energy after you finish your courses, obviously. LinkedIn Learning and Do It classes are also another really good thing to take advantage of. You can learn a ton of new skills, everything from analysis, working with Excel, different programs, design programs. You can learn all of those for free because you're a student. So take advantage of those. I know you don't want to spend more time on a computer, nobody does, but it's a really good way to be productive, take advantage of those opportunities, and have some more things that can kind of fill out your resume and really make you stand out as a candidate. This is tough. A pandemic is not the easiest time to be thinking about starting an international career, and that's okay. But you can do this, and there are a ton of resources that can help you and support you throughout this process. As I mentioned, people like Molly, your academic advisors, are fantastic. Rely on them. They know a lot. They can answer a lot of your questions. They're there for you. If you're an LNS student, you also have access to career advising through SuccessWorks. You can make an appointment through that link, whether it's with me or with another one of our amazing advisors. We have all sorts of different areas that we focus on, everything from health to education or business communications. So feel free to make an appointment with any of us, all of us, whatever works for you. If you're from another school or college, there are offices that focus on careers that are even more tailored toward your specific degree and interests, so check those out as well. And one last resource that I want to plug is Handshake. Handshake is UW-Madison's platform for pretty much everything career development related, jobs, internships, events, all of that good stuff. So if you don't already have a Handshake account, well, you do have a Handshake account, all you need to do is activate it. So take a couple of minutes, do that now, and kind of get more comfortable with the platform. Career fairs are happening through Handshake this fall. Some of them have already happened. Hopefully you were able to participate in those. If you weren't, there's still more coming up, so you still have more opportunities, but definitely get familiar with Handshake. At least for this near future, it is where a lot of things will be happening. So worth getting comfortable with that platform. And that's pretty much everything that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmeline. And that was, you prefaced it, you gave fair warning. It's a lot of information and a lot of links and a lot of kind of follow-up stuff that would come with that. And I think one of the big takeaways I posted in the chat, the link to your website if students have questions about specifically tailoring resumes to different jobs, if they have questions about specific search internships or kind of really doing a deep dive on some of the opportunities you talked about, that they can schedule appointments with you or another advisor. And there's some upcoming alumni events that SuccessWorks is putting on too, and all of that, if they reach out to you, they can kind of navigate that with you, it sounds like a little bit, which is great. I do want to take, so thank you so much. I do want to take a few moments just to have some questions with you and Gabriella. And the first question I have for Gabriella is there something that you felt helped you most break into the field of nonprofits and NGOs? Did you feel that your education opened the door for working in nonprofits, or was it kind of piecemeal, or was there a particular experience, or was it networking? If there was one big thing that you felt really kind of helped you get into or break into that career, or what you wish you'd had maybe when you were breaking into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have I have an answer, and it is deciding that is where I deserve to be. I think I got on campus and I was like, okay, like this feels very intimidating. There's a lot of other things going on. Like, how am I going to find this internship? I think I was I'm in general a pretty type A person. So I was like, okay, only 4 years, got to make the most of it. And so I was starting to think about those things right away. And I was like, how am I going to get this experience? How am I going to differentiate myself from other freshmen? How am I going to differentiate myself from other people at different schools? And I can think of a few things. One was my sophomore year applying to work at the Wisconsin State Assembly. Again, not exactly what I at the time thought I wanted to do, but it gave me a network of other students interning that were really interested that I could start learning things about. It gave me something good to talk about on my resume in other internship interviews. And it did ultimately help me sort of figure out what I wanted to do and the direction I wanted to go in, but also talking to my advisor. I, made an appointment and I was like, look, I don't know what to do. This is a very broad major. I need a little bit of help here. And it was great just having somebody to bounce some ideas off of. And I'm still obviously in touch with the program, but also the person who was my advisor at the time as well. And I think just some of that external validation of saying like, yeah, you're gonna work in nonprofits. So here's where you have to start looking. Here's where you have to start applying. Like, you just have to say it out loud. Like, I'm looking for an internship in nonprofits, or, I'm a young nonprofit professional, or working, internationally. I think saying that, and then acting like you think, I don't know, whoever else is that person would do, can mean a lot. So I think I started walking the walk, or talking the talk before I could walk the walk, and one clearly followed after the other.
Kind of that manifesting a little bit,
Yeah,
in the process of it. Thank you. I think one of the other questions that comes up a lot recently, or at least that I think Chuned's on the call too here, for those of you who have Chuned as an advisor, he's hiding with camera off. But one of the things I think that both of us have seen a lot from students is the question of how to, feeling overwhelmed with everything that's happening with the pandemic, but then also wanting to like take advantage of the time that you have to really be, I don't want to say to like make yourself competitive, but to feel productive in the sense of professional development while you're doing it. And it can be very overwhelming to try and do that while you're balancing a whole new modality of schoolwork. But what would do you have any advice, either, you or Emmeline, on how students can, one of the things we talked about was like, it's great to live abroad, but we can't really go abroad. And so how can students use this time to get commensurate experience or similar experience if certain options are just simply unavailable to them, and not through anyone's choice or fault or, lack of preparation, but just a matter of things that are out of your control? What advice might you have for students trying to navigate that?
I have a few thoughts, but Emmeline, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think at least the thing that I kind of keep coming back to with students is that flexibility is key at this point. And, it can be really hard when your dream internship got canceled or your dream job suddenly kind of disappears because the nonprofit lost funding or things like that. It's happening, it's the reality, and it's really hard and really frustrating. But, this pandemic, it's impacting everyone, everywhere, all around the world. So what feels like a setback now is a setback, and it's okay to be frustrated, it's okay to be annoyed, but there are other things that you can do that, in the long term, it might not be the same path that you take to get there, but you can still get to the same place in the long run. It's about creativity, flexibility, transferable skills, which Gabrielle, you did a great job talking about the importance of those, especially in like a first kind of position. That's really essential. So even if your plan gets kind of messed up, that's okay. It's happening to everyone. Everyone's in the same position, and there are still things that you can do to get to the same place wherever you want to be in the long run.
Just thinking a little more creatively, maybe. Yeah. And yeah, taking things as they come, or saying, this is going to be what I do right now, and I keep my mind open, and I'm looking for the next thing while I'm doing this, and just trying to juggle and balance, and using resources for support as a whole human as you're doing that, not feeling like you have to do all of it all the time right now, just because we're, staying local a little bit more. Yeah. Gabriella, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I had a few really concrete things I was thinking of, and I'll mention them at the end, but Emmeline, while you were speaking, something that came to me was actually something that a UW-Madison professor said when I did a field study to Cuba. I actually have like right behind me. It seems to be like my study abroad wall and international experience, but we have a plan, the plan may change. And it was like kind of a joke on the trip, like, okay, we don't really know what we're getting into, but that has actually been something I apply to so much of my professional life, my personal life. The next career step that I thought I was going to take in January is no longer where I am mentally or physically now. I think having that flexibility, getting excited about a job or an internship or an opportunity is great, but like be able to pivot, be able to say, okay, what else could I do? What is out here is really important, because that's also something I do like the micro level, maybe 4 or 5 times a day at work. Like, okay, plan A didn't work. We're shifting to plan B, like, let's keep going. And I think when you're working or studying internationally, there's going to be a lot more iterations of your plan in general. And then the really concrete things that I would say, if you think you might go to grad school and you are, or any professional school, and you are, towards the end of your degree, start thinking about studying, because that is something that I really wish that I would have done right after graduating, or take a practice test. Maybe, you think you want to go to law school and you take a practice LSAT and you're like, oh, this is not for me. Like, you're in that study mode. If you're looking for things, like, it's a good time to maybe just like pick up the flashcards. The other one is really like dive into a like language course or immersion option if you can. When you were talking about the sort of international institution, something I thought of was the friend that I have who was not qualified for a job because she didn't speak French. And a lot of UN agencies, if that's ultimately where you want to be, well, that's a whole nother conversation, do prefer proficiency in French as well as English. And that was like tough for her because she speaks Spanish fluently, but she doesn't speak French. So I think worth, thinking about that if you are interested in language, or I know probably all of you on this call have a language requirement, but if you're feeling good about it, maybe you want to like take something else pass fail, or you want to just, pick up Duolingo and start doing a little extra practicing outside of the classroom. And then the third thing I was thinking about was that volunteering, getting some of those experiences, whether there's a very important, election coming up, if you want to do something really locally, there's a lot around getting out the vote that can be done, registering voters, which also hopefully everyone is registered to vote, just have to say it. But also, Emmeline, you had a lot of other great examples of like doing work really locally. And I think that some of the volunteer work I've done outside of my job has given me a little bit of energy. It's like helped me sort of step out of where I am, that I found to be really powerful. And also, it's something to talk about in your next internship. How did you react to the pandemic? Well, I started volunteering and I started doing this in my community. And being on the other side of that chair as a hiring manager, I know that I would be impressed by that. So those are my concrete things as well.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I want to be respectful of your time and of the time of folks who registered and joined us today. So I know we talked about a little bit kind of how students can follow up with you, and I think we should be able to, Essie, we should be able to follow up with everyone correctly, right? If we wanted to like forward maybe Emmeline's PowerPoint or email contacts if students have questions and want to connect maybe with Gabriella or Emmeline directly. Can we do that through Eventbrite?
Yes, we can email everyone here with any of the information Molly wants to forward to all who registered on Eventbrite. And I don't think there's anyone here who didn't register through Eventbrite, since you wouldn't have gotten the information. But if that happens to be you, feel free to drop your email in the chat and I'll keep track of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so just thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and a very special thank you once again to our guests, Gabriella and Emmeline, for your time and your expertise and your support of students. I think we had, I have even just written down 5 or 10 more questions that I think we could have asked and would have had a great discussion on. So I know that time is a valuable thing these days. And so I would really encourage students to follow up with you if they have other questions, or maybe I can help facilitate some of those conversations if that's helpful too. We'll be sure to share that information. And with that, I think we'll bring the event to a close. Please do your best to stay safe and healthy, and make decisions that will keep those you love safe and healthy as well. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you all.